So how can Al Jazeera focus something like that? And is it possible to do so if the Arabic people do not want? Then it's not possible. But if there is something like an openness inside the conservative and strong, convinced Islam, for example, if you have some kind of Saudi Arabia, he is well studied, he speaks English, he's also able to discuss, to defend, to debate his Islamic conviction and his Islamic why he is convinced that Islam is the truth and so on. So why shouldn't it be possible that there is something like a more open discussion culture about Islam also in comparison to Christianity? Is there something Islam has to fear if it's strong? And if it's not really strong, why should it be secured and saved and really be saved through an exclusive, suppressing, dominating Islamic direction, like in some parts of the more radical Salafist movements or the more radical conservative Islamic movements, if you say it in more general terms, not to blame the Salafists as generally be radical, extreme or whatever, which I wouldn't say, because in Germany you have some Salafi people, or the same thing in the Salafi movement and all over Saudi Arabia, I guess. They're not all to be put into a radical extremist box, for example. So is it possible for Al Jazeera to include the discussion between Islam and Christianity without doing it in an ungood, uniting or connecting or Islam weakening way, if they fear Islam will be weakened, into is it possible to include that? Is it possible to get Christians on Al Jazeera Arabic, for example, would be the question. Al Jazeera English is covering that, but the Arabic people of Egypt, of maybe even Saudi Arabia, even if Al Jazeera is not so popular there, or in Qatar, or all over Northern Africa, they are not looking Al Jazeera English, they are looking Al Jazeera Arabic. So would it destroy Islam if Islam would be more openly discussing its faith, its conviction, its theology? Is it a contradiction to have a Sharia implemented? Is it possible to have a Sharia implemented into a governmental system, into a constitution? Egypt would be, for example, a good experiment to check that out and to see if it's working. Is it possible, or is it an illusion? Is it a false flag, if you want, which is throwing sand into the eyes of people in the West to make the West believe that Islam is peaceful? If we would say, or someone would say, or you would say that conservative Islam can be also open. Is it something which will be misused, like it is being misused in Turkey? Is it possible to just have some time of restoration in Egypt without having the division which many expect will come in Egypt, and which is also described in the Bible in Isaiah 19? From my viewpoint, it's good for Egypt to approach a more inclusive conservative Islam. It's not because I would fear, or I would say we as Christians need to be not persecuted or whatever. If Islam wants to persecute Christianity, in the end God will give judgment to them. They will pay the price for it. Even people will misuse the name of God to punish Islam for that, as Islam is already blamed for being evil from the West, which is not good, because Islam is not to be demonized as a whole religion and as a whole part of a world and a region. But anyway, the people still decide if they want to exclude Arabic Christians, for example. And that's a very hurtful thing for convinced Arabic Muslims, conservative Arabic Muslims. And Arabic societies, if you are really honestly heading to the core of the problem in that societies, they are really not comfortable with the idea that Christians, Arabic origin, leave the Ummah, leave the Arabic Islamic society, because Islam tends to be felt as a political religion, and in many cases it is a more political religion. So is it possible to change this? Is it wanted to be changed? Do, for example, rebels in Syria, mercenaries from Libya who are paid by other governments, also as paid by interest groups, and who are supported by the Sunni, more radical and also military active Ummah. Is it possible for those guys to accept that if I would be Christian and if I would be right now in Dara, for example, would I be killed if I'm an open convinced Christian and if I would give an Injil, a New Testament, to someone who is fighting with a weapon and who is carrying an anti-tank missile? I don't know. Why is it a problem for someone, and should it be a problem, and is it necessary to have this understanding, and is it the understanding and the true interpretation of a strong conservative Islam and Quran? The Quran is in Arabic. It's not, there's only one Quran. So what does the Quran say? Is it possible to interpret the Quran as an open approach, or is it, and if you're still very convinced about that and still, and if you don't have this mystical, weak Islam which people hate in that conservative movement? That's the question. And well, Al Jazeera can really do a good thing in that. And if you watch Al Jazeera English, you will see that it's really enabling the revolutions there, and it's not only enabling, it's fueling it, and it's very biased in a way. It's not displaying both sides in Syria, for example. Syria is split, and not all people who are right now living in by mercenaries controlled areas or rebels, and even some would call them terrorists. In a way, they are terroristic in their behavior. Well, it's one-sided. So is it possible to be more open according to Syria for Al Jazeera? I guess, and I pray and I hope and I think that it should be. From my viewpoint, it needs to change, and the same thing according to Christian faith, according to Arabic Christians which are existing, which shouldn't be killed in Saudi Arabia, which shouldn't be killed in other countries through conservative, strong, convinced conservative Islamic people. So from my viewpoint, it doesn't have to be like that as it is right now, because I don't see why, for example, a Salafi rebel, a Salafi, not Salafi, but a conservative Salafi, a radical Salafi mercenary, rebel or terrorist, why should this guy want to kill me in the end? There is no spiritual reason from my side, because the Quran also says that we are people of the Holy Book. And so am I misusing the Quran if I say, please don't kill me? Or is it impossible to have a non-violent, non-radical, non-terroristic, non-aggressive, conservative, strong